President Trump threatened to obliterate Iran's power plants if Tehran did not fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours. Joining us to discuss is Rod Martin, political analyst, founder and CEO of Martin Capital. So, Rod, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. Can we just get your read on the situation, President Trump's warning here?
Well, the president is doing what he always does in the art of the deal. It's just as plain as day. This has always been part of the strategy. It will continue to be. You know, the reality is that the United States benefits more from the closure of the strait than it might wish to let on. We saw this past week in particular, the Europeans absolutely refuse to guarantee their own oil supply with not even with combat forces, not even with fighter jets or warships, frigates to escort tankers, minesweepers to help clear out the strait. So what does that do? It demonstrates that America is the indispensable ally in NATO. NATO is not actually reliable, and all their hectoring of the United States is a joke. And it gives Trump an opportunity to transfer the locus of maritime insurance from the City of London to Washington. So if the strait remains closed just a little bit longer, the world isn't going to end from Trump's perspective. Meanwhile, we actually finished the job of making it impossible for the Iranians to continue mining the strait, continue threatening commerce, and eventually, God willing, we actually cause the fall of the regime.
So let me just add to your point, Rod. President Trump has previously said the U.S. doesn't need anybody when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. He's almost asking for help just to see which countries is actually going to help the United States. And President Trump has said that he will remember, the U.S. will remember which countries answer to the U.S.'s help. But let me also get your thoughts on oil prices right now. How much of this price increase do you think is driven by actual supply disruptions versus speculation of the market? And is there an element of overreaction in your opinion?
Oh, it's absolutely an overreaction, and it's going to come back down. You know, you have several elements of this. Obviously, the strait is closed more by the insurance situation than it is by the actual military situation. That much has been clear from the outset of the war. So once that's resolved, you bring down prices a bit. Once you get closer to the strait being cleared, that's going to bring down prices a lot. The prices aren't crazy right now. They're actually quite a lot lower than they were at the outset of the Ukraine war, and those came down quite rapidly too. So what you really get to is once this war is concluded successfully, there's going to be no problem with transit through the strait. So that brings 20% of the world's crude back online without any problem. A free Iran, or even an Iranian regime that makes peace with the U.S., is suddenly going to be in a different situation. It's going to be able to ship oil unsanctioned, which brings all of that Iranian production back onto the global market. Heretofore, it's just been steeply discounted and almost entirely shipped to China. Now it would be available for the whole world at a market price, which actually helps Iran get back on its feet. And finally, and this is the crucial thing, everybody has forgotten that oil prices have had a built-in risk premium for decades based on the possibility that Iran might close the strait. Well, we're seeing that in real time now. We're also seeing that that's about to end. When it's gone definitively, oil prices aren't just going to come back down to where they were. They're going to drop a lot lower than that.
Okay, I also wanted to ask you this. You made some great points just now. The impact is likely limited, but what is the impact on the U.S.? Because it seems like from the U.S. side, we're very eager here. Besant saying we're allowing some previously restricted shipments to enter the global market. So how much is the impact?
The real impact is quite minimal, actually. The market is overreacting. So the Iranian oil that's already been shipped out of Iran is pretty much under our control at this point. That was kind of a Hail Mary play by the Iranians, and it's backfiring on them. So we can use that crude now to significantly improve global supply. We're also releasing 400 million barrels from the U.S. and allied strategic petroleum reserves. That probably buys you a month by itself. We're also desanctioning for a limited time, for limited purposes, Russian oil exports, which gives them a foretaste of what could happen if they would make peace and the sanctions all go away. But it also reduces actual global supply shock. So again, I really believe the market's overreacting here. There's an opportunity to make money on that, of course, but it's not real.
Okay, let me just get your opinion on something you brought up, the release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. In your opinion, is it justified? Some people are saying it's not justified. Some people are saying this is exactly the emergency where you would do this.
Well, this is the reason those reserves were set up in the first place. You know, back in 75, the U.S. set up its own Strategic Petroleum Reserve in Louisiana, and the idea was to avoid an oil shock like what we had in 1973. You're just not going to have that anymore in America. Not the 73 oil shock, not the 79 oil shock, not even the 1990 disruption because of Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. We are almost, and could be if we wish, entirely self-sufficient. Also, we have imports to the degree that we still choose to import for a variety of reasons from Canada and Venezuela. We don't need anybody outside of the Caribbean basin in North America, except in California, where Gavin Newsom's crazy Democrats have just made it impossible to produce oil. And so they actually import from the Middle East. They're the one part of the United States that is still dependent there. But that's not necessary. That's a choice. And for the rest of the country, we actually are not deeply affected by the Middle East. And if this were to carry on, what you would see is what is currently a global oil market begin to decouple. And suddenly, you know, you wouldn't just have a slight price differential between West Texas Intermediate and Brent crude. You would actually have a complete divergence in those two markets over time. We're never going to see that because this war is going to be over pretty soon. But that's what would happen. And America would be fine and the rest of the world would have a problem.
Okay, understood. You mentioned earlier that there's money to be made in this situation. Prices going up, and you're saying it's going to come down eventually. To you personally, what are the specific triggers that you're looking for oil prices to come down?
Well, the biggest thing is just winning the war. I mean, when it's done, it's done. But at some point, probably short of that, we're going to actually get really serious about clearing the mines out of the strait. Now, there aren't huge numbers of them because we sank the Iranian Navy pretty quick at the outset of the war. So they haven't been able to go lay all the mines they'd like to. But what we've done since is we've destroyed not just the boats that would lay the mines, we have destroyed the factories that make the mines. So there is a real threat. It really does need to be taken seriously, and yet it's small. So the U.S. has more than enough capacity to be able to sweep the strait and get it free for commerce. You then still have a bit of a missile and drone threat. We can handle that, and we are handling it right now. So this doesn't last very long. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Estonia, which was one of our very first NATO allies to step up. Their Navy is actually specialized in minesweeping, and they offered to help before any of our other allies that we supposedly count on did. So good for Estonia, and I'm really glad to see Keir Starmer and Mertz and the rest of them come around.
So, Rod, okay, let me ask you one last question here. I'm wondering, how is the Iran war impacting China's energy supply, specifically oil? I'm hearing reports that China is still getting some oil.
Well, they are, and to the degree we're allowing Iranian oil to ship, they're certainly getting some of that, although Besant has said that we're going to redirect a good bit of that oil. The real problem for China is not so much the supply shock as the loss of the deeply discounted oil they've been getting from Venezuela, from Iran, and from Russia. That accounts for more than 40% of their total imports, and they are highly import dependent. So if you're getting that at a ridiculous discount, that's running your economy. That's a huge cushion. It is an unfair trade advantage that they are getting by breaking international law that's about to go away. So in dealing with Iran, we dry up one of the main sources of that unfair advantage for the Chinese. And as we get to a peace in Ukraine, we're going to see the rest of it dry up because Russia's oil will no longer be sanctioned. It will be going at market price. And China has a teetering economy that's going to impact in a pretty ugly way.
Okay, just one final thing then, very quickly. So if the Russian oil dries up too, how do you see the Chinese economy and its trajectory? Where is it headed?
I think they're in danger of a real recession. And of course, you understand a recession is sustained growth under 1%. So, potentially still grow. I've seen some pretty good numbers that suggest that the Chinese economy isn't growing anymore, certainly growing much, much less than its official numbers would suggest. So this is a country that's in a lot of trouble. As you know, they have a tremendous demographic crisis. They're at less than a 1.0 total fertility rate. It takes 2.1 to be able to just replace your population. We have several smart demographers who believe that that's going to stabilize at about a 0.8. What that does is it takes China's population from a current 1.3 billion range to about 310 million by the end of the century. And in the short term, of course, the older people are ballooning in number while the working people, the working age people, are shrinking rapidly. So you have fewer people taking care of more and more older people, and their investments are in real estate that's shrinking in value precisely because there are fewer people. So China's economy has about 10 years tops before this starts going into free fall. And this oil shift potentially pushes it toward, if not over, that cliff.
Wow, 10 years tops. This is very eye-opening insight, Rod. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.